Okay. This is a story that was requested by Roger Meadows, and Indy, you also gave me the link to it. Are you ready for some private equity football?
This is a really interesting story.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Indy, do you have the link to this article too available to yourself as well?
I don't. I mean, I can open it up for
Oh
sure,
no, no,
but I just figured I'll look at your screen that you're sharing. But
all good, all
um,
good. So, folks, reading this article, again, if you're not going to vomit with rage, I don't know what else to tell you. But greediest owners in pro sports are now welcoming in the greed kings of high finance. Say it with me. What could possibly go wrong? Indy, before we tackle this article, do you want to have any comments before we dive deep into the corruption and wonderful world of private equity football?
yeah, I'm actually a big fan. First of all, I love that you're sharing independent media and independent sources, and we're not looking at mainstream corporate news, and that's why independent media is so important because you're not going to get stories like this on corporate news. They don't want to tell their audiences about this. A, they don't think that their audiences care, and B, they don't want them to find out that BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street are now buying into their favorite NFL franchise. This was published by inequality.org. I really like they focus a lot on the money and on the divide between the haves and the have-nots. And Sam Pizzigatti is one of their better writers. So I was happy to find him writing this story. He tends to look for, where is that big imbalance? So this is, billionaires getting enriched by further billionaires. But yeah, go ahead. This is a fascinating story.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about this. So, the billionaires who run the world's most phenomenally profitable sport have just decided to share the wealth with the greediest of their fellow rich. By a 31-1 margin, the owners of the 32 pro football franchises that make up the NFL have just voted to crack open their money-making machine to investment fund kingpins of private equity. And let's face it, private equity, they like to pick the body clean. The NFL isn't exactly welcoming in private equity with total open arms. Only some NFL pre-approved private equity firms will initially be able to buy up stakes in NFL franchises, and the NFL will allow no single private equity stake to amount to over 10% of a franchise's total value. Bullshit. The current NFL.
No, I don't know about that, but will they be able to hold stakes in multiple franchises to which they will own as much as 10% in each one of those franchises? There's no rule that really said they couldn't do that. It just said that they couldn't own any more than 10% of any one, so they couldn't gain controlling interest of any of the franchises and force them to move or force the league to do certain things. But they can certainly have a lot of scratch, a lot of influence, and a lot of power within those halls. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So, real quick here, again, continue on. The current NFL billionaire owners, in other words, will still be calling the shots. I don't think so. That's not going to be happening. These owners are essentially counting on their new private equity pals, they're not your pals, to make them even more powerful shot callers. How so? Right now, for instance, NFL owners have to bargain with elected officials over how lush the taxpayer subsidies they expect and extract will be. Just like how the goddamn Chicago Bears, don't think I forgot that, Bears. And I know I'm not a Bears fan after how they've been the owners have been very disrespectful to my city, okay? And far as I'm concerned, we have no football team because they want to set up a whole new stadium outside Chicago. Well, if you don't like Chicago, then F right off. And that goes for any sports team. You don't like your city, then F off. And if you can't do that, then F off. And if you really can't do that, F off, okay? Because these subsidies that are going to these big stadiums are draining people, okay? I'm all for entertainment, but things are getting out of hand. Welcoming private equity into the NFL will only strengthen the owner's bargaining position. They'll be able to leverage their new access of private equity cash to tighten their squeeze on local politicians. Give us what we want, or we'll build our new stadium outside your jurisdiction.
Which is exactly what you just talked about in Chicago with the Bears.
Exactly, and I hate every minute of it because it's maybe this is just my brain and how I've been raised and trained. But if you make a promise, if you have an honor, if you are representing your city, your home, take pride in it. But these corporations and these private equity firms and these NFL owners don't believe in that. All what they care about is profit. Why do you think food and all the merchandise there is so expensive? They want to bleed everyone dry. The downside of letting in private equity in, NFL owners don't see one. After all, every other major pro sport, from baseball to basketball to hockey and soccer, also called football, is already sporting a private equity presence. In Major League Baseball, the presence began after the Major League Baseball took over the baseball minor leagues in 2020, knocked a number of small cities out of the minor league system, eliminated the prohibition against the ownership of multiple minor league teams. That made the minors a tempting target for a private equity greed grab.
Silver Lake, again, what they just scroll up a little bit, they removed the prohibition against ownership of multiple minor league teams. Mm-hmm. This is going to allow an oligarch to basically, at some point, scoop up all of the minor leagues and have controlling interest, or a handful.
Yeah. Also, real quick here, too, I want to point out here, Silver Lake Partners, the world's 15th largest private equity firm, has taken the lead on that grabbing. Silver Lake has been underwriting Diamond Baseball Holdings, an operation that has already brought up over a quarter of Major League Baseball's 120 minor league franchises, and has no plans to stop buying up franchises anytime soon. The basic Diamond Baseball Holdings game plan with these franchises demand public subsidies that have so far cost local communities hundreds of millions of dollars. This foistering of costs onto taxpayers, notes boondoggle analysis Pat Garofalo, I probably said that name wrong, comes with the ever-present threat of moving teams out of communities that don't comply. So if you don't follow orders from the corporations, or either that the NFL and their private equity friends, whatever, moving,
they're going to take their franchise and go. Look, the Raiders moved to Las Vegas, and they demanded a new stadium out of Oakland. Oakland couldn't do it. They don't have the money. So they moved to Vegas.
Right. So in other words, I want to point this out here. Silver Lake is currently managing over $100 billion in overall combined assets. The ownership of these assets can get complicated. Diamond Baseball Holdings, for instance, oriented and enterprise owned by the Silver Lake-backed Endeavor entertainment industry colossus. Silver Lake is now planning to take the publicity-traded Endeavor private in a transaction some are calling the largest in media and entertainment history. This transaction
Endeavor owns MMA. They own the UFC and WWE, by the way, also. I think they also own Formula One, potentially. They're like the biggest, they're becoming one of the biggest conglomerates, and they have a lot of Saudi money behind them, is my understanding. But
right. So I also want to pull this up here. Too. The transaction will be particularly rewarding for the executives involved. Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel will receive a whopping $25 million asset sale transaction bonus. Oh, who doesn't love that kind of bonus, right?
A $25 million bonus.
Yes, isn't that great? Hey, Indy, check the mail. You're getting a $50 million bonus. Isn't that great? Endeavor COO, Chief Operating Officer Mark Shapiro. Oh, that's an odd name. Deadline.com reports will see his base salary jump to $7 million a year with a guaranteed annual $15 million bonus. Wow. All this sounds so great. I'm crying on the inside. He'll also be eligible for a $15 million transaction bonus when Endeavor is privatized, as well as maximum cash bonus of a whopping $100 million upon the completion of certain qualifying asset sales. Emmanuel Shapiro will also each receive a private plane.
I think it's Mark Shapiro. I'm pretty sure that guy used to be the general manager of the Cleveland Indians. Well, you're not allowed to say that. The Cleveland Guardians now, they call them. Whatever.
The private equity industry has, over time, generating plenty of windfalls like these. For decades now, private equity firms have been buying up firms, charging them enormous fees, and stripping them of their assets. The private equity execs, their pockets full, then sell off what remains of the firms they've so ruthlessly exploited and depart the scene, leaving behind laid-off workers and unhappy consumers. America's largest participation sport, bowling, has been experiencing a good bit of this classic private equity pattern. Private equity investors have enabled one giant company, Bolero, I probably said that wrong, to to dominate what used to be locally controlled leisure time enterprise. Isn't that great? So just 10
And
years old.
they own like Bowlmore and Lucky Strike lanes, and they started building these like luxury bowling lanes and closing down all the old bowling alleys that we remember that we went to when we were kids, where it was cheap to go bowling for your family. Now, it's really important to understand that they've effectively made it too expensive for the average family to be able to afford to go bowling now.
Mm-hmm. So just 10 years old, Bolero runs over 350 bowling centers nationwide. Prices at these centers have gone up. The Levers, Amos Barshed reports that maintenance has gone down. Oh, wow. Geez, who saw that coming? Bolero also has even introduced Uber-like surge pricing. A few hours of bowling at a Northern California Bolero is now set $400 can now set a family bowling. Bathrooms at another Bolero can go days without being cleaned. Yo, what is this? $400 just to go bowl? I might as well make my own bowling ring, man. What is this? Private equity top executives, meanwhile, are certainly cleaning up at pay time. The CEO of Blackstone. Hey, folks, Blackstone is here. Private equity giant Steve Schwarzman last year pocketed $896.7 million in dividends and compensation, just a bit off the $1.1 billion he inhaled back in 2021. Oh man, that's low numbers, buddy. Get back to that $1 billion count. Numbers like these have caught the attention of some members of Congress. This past April, U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin from the great state of Wisconsin and 14 of her Senate colleagues introduced legislation that would nearly double the federal tax rate on the income private equity firms pull in. Success was that legislation could lead to stronger controls on private equity in other realms. But that success won't come easy. Private equity execs are spending more than ever these days on politics. In the current election cycle, notes the Center for Media and Democracy, the top 50 national contributors to political campaigns include 11 equity giants. Say it with me,
including Timothy Mellon, who is Trump's largest donor. I believe also is private equity. You know, that's Thiel. Peter Thiel has a lot of money under management. I mean, private equity is what's running the world right now.
Yep. Now, I also want to pull this up here too. These 11 have already contributed to $223 million in congressional and presidential candidates and the super PACs that back them. In the 2016 election cycle, candidates and political committees only collected $92 million from the 147 private equity firms the center was then tracking. In the meantime, we don't need to leave the future of our beloved sports to the whims of billionaires. Another model for how sports franchises could operate does exist. Indeed, a hint of that model exists within the NFL with the Green Bay Packers, the most unique franchise in U.S. pro sports, because the Packers are publicly owned, unlike the Bears, which, by the way, look, folks, the Chicago Bears as a franchise has been absolutely... I actually broke all ties with them when they failed miserably the last time when they went to the Super Bowl. That was absolutely embarrassed. I was absolutely embarrassed to watch them play when I was doing my second tour in Iraq. And you know what? I have to say at this point, all these sports teams, you want to treat people like crap, then you deserve to be treated like crap too. That's why there should be empty stadiums, because people shouldn't be wasting their money going to these institutions that are just bleeding communities dry. The Packers have operated a publicly owned nonprofit corporation since 1923. No billionaire owns the Packers, and no billionaire the team's 538,967 stockholders maintain ever will. The franchise's articles of incorporation prohibit any person from owning more than 200,000 of the 5.2 million franchise shares now outstanding. The average shareholder, the Green Bay Press Gazette points out, holds fewer than 10 shares, and these shares can't be traded, only transferred to family members. Shareholders don't get dividends, but they do get to elect the franchise's board of directors. Sounds pretty good, right? Not to the NFL's other 31 franchises. The NFL now has in place bylaws that prevent any other franchise from operating along the Green Bay model. Gee, why is that?
Man, first of all, Green Bay, they run as a non-profit. That's the biggest reason why. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Have they hurt over the last 40 years compared to every other franchise run as a not-for-profit corporation that's not billionaire controlled? I would say no. Look, they had rough years, just like every other franchise I think has rough years, but not being billionaire owned and controlled and actually belonging to the city and to the residents and to the people of Green Bay. People in Green Bay actually like have a stake in the Packers. Like they care because they care, and because, look, it's all laundry and they're all multimillionaire players. And, before the pandemic and before I had kids, I felt very differently about pro sports. As a single person, I was a sports junkie. I loved watching pro sports, and especially watching the economy get wrecked. We had the way that we have in the last 7, 8, 10 years with COVID stuff and all the other distractions that we've got. Like, it's been clear to me that they've been using pro sports as part of the bread and circuses to keep us distracted, to keep us from realizing just how badly the entire system has been set up to screw us and benefit the wealthy and the few. And I kind of lost my taste for it. And I just feel like, and again, the other thing is they keep moving cities so much. The players, you don't know who's who. And it's like you're rooting for laundry because you like the city versus the player because he's played for 6 different teams, whereas Derek Jeter played for the Yankees and Cal Ripken played for the Orioles and Larry Bird played for the Celtics. You don't have any LeBron. How many teams has LeBron played for now? 4? Cleveland, LA, Miami, 3, Cleveland twice.
Precisely, dude. Looking at how our entire entertainment is also connected to because again, when you look at these sports teams, there's a lot of other industries involved too, and it's about control, it's about manipulation, it's about propaganda, and for the business surrounding these stadiums, wherever they be baseball, hockey, basketball, football, whatever. Okay. I mean, for a while, those businesses succeed, but like any, there's always a season. And when the season's done, guess what happens? Everything dries up. Business die down. The whole idea of having a business is having continuous, ongoing, flowing income. And that doesn't work all the time. And of course, then when you have these stadiums also rent them services out, I mean, these are at exorbitant prices. And not to mention, if a team chooses to move, you know what that means, Indy? Like, let's say a big major league team moves out of a major metropolitan city and sets up their institution, their stadium somewhere else. You know what
it's
happens?
devastating to that economy.
Yeah, not only is that, but then they're stuck with the skeletal remains of a stadium. What do? The cost of tearing it down might even be too costly. Who knows if the team will actually give up their land rights? Because knowing how private equity works, they're not just going to give up something and say, okay, we're not going to be here. They're still going to hold on to it. And if you think that they're going to be paying the rent on an empty stadium, you're gravely mistaken, folks. I mean, Indy, am I wrong on that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I think San Antonio might still have a football stadium that they built for the Saints temporarily when during Katrina. Sometimes these things. Look, the Brendan Byrne Arena. I live in New Jersey. They used to be called the Meadowlands Arena. It's still sitting there. They built the Prudential Center in Newark. Very few events are held there, and it's just this big albatross that the state now has to deal with.
Isn't that great? What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong with having a empty stadium, except for the fact that it's a drain on public resources? It also serves as a risk too, because you're going to have some dumb idiots wanting to check out the empty stadium. You're going to have the cost of security. You're going to have any other incidents take place. And, these private equity firms, they're not your friends. They will hold on to it or hold on to any property and still expect the people to pay off it. So to anyone in my city, for example, that is a Chicago Bears fan, Soldiers Field, it is a very interesting landmark. It has its own story. Hell, even Old Man Daly put his input into it a long time ago, but that's a story for another day. But can you imagine just looking at that empty field now, the Bears no longer being there potentially? I mean, it's a slap in the face. And anybody that's a sports fan, you shouldn't give loyalty to these teams if they have no loyalty to your city or your community, because at the end of the day, it's all entertainment, it's all fun. But I was always raised that, hey, look, when you go outside, you represent your family, you represent your community, you represent who you are through them. And these teams, now run by, again, corrupt CEOs and private equity firms now, they're only caring about profit. You have no incentive to be wasting your hard-earned capital by supporting these teams. I think at this point, let's look at creating our own teams. Let's try and do something else without them, because things are getting way too expensive. How the hell are people supposed to enjoy, a day or a night at a basketball game or at a football game or at a baseball game, and it costs an arm and a leg just to attend? Like, who are they expecting to fill in these gigantic stadiums?
Businesses are buying luxury box and the whole front row seats, and they're catering to the local economy, so their executives all get to hang out, and that's all a business write-off, by the way. It's just entertainment expense. They can take the politicians. It's good for the politicians to say that they brought people in. Right now we need to focus our money on more important things than I don't know. Look, we need distractions too, but I feel like pro sports has just gotten financially out of control. The money is just too great. You've got it controlled by a handful of the same billionaires that control every other industry. It has become a multi-billion-dollar industry on its own, and they've done that on the backs of the working class by raising ticket prices and making remember the ticket licenses, the seat licenses. When you went to buy season tickets, you had to pay for the privilege to even buy your seats, and then you were forced to buy even the games that you didn't want to buy. Like, there's got to be a better way. But I've read these books about how to kind of bring pro sports back to the masses. I would love to see that, because the elites have bastardized it with the big money and have made it so that a lot of the stuff is kind of, look, hockey is an expensive sport even to play as a kid, and it's just, I just am seeing just how everything that as a kid, it's fun and entertainment. I get it. Things were just as bad, like, and corrupt when I was growing up, but now it's intensified to a level to where all entertainment is controlled by just a handful of institutions and private equity firms and hedge fund managers. And it's all costing so much money to where, okay, for a long time, our system has distracted the people with bread and circuses. I hope they do realize that, hey, if people can't afford to enjoy this stuff anymore, people are going to start paying attention to why things suck. And so politicians, just remember, when people start giving you the middle finger, when your stadiums are empty, when people are no longer buying your stuff and actually calling you out, just remember, you're taking away any kind of joy that people do have. But also, what do you expect from a corrupt system that doesn't care about the people? What they care about is short-term profit, fattening up their wallets even more. They only care about just how much more money they will get. This is not a healthy system. And the fact that, look, you might maybe have one or two politicians standing up, but the vast majority of these politicians, they're not going to do it. And local politicians, dealing with monoliths like private equity firms and so much more, they're not going to have the political ammunition to fight back, because these private equity firms, like Wall Street and the big banks, know how to control the politicians.
Yeah, are buying the politicians, buying the institutions. So, folks,
it's funny. I want to mention one other thing. Our friend, the Golden Monarch, who might be in chat right now, he's working on. He's been sending me stuff. We've been talking about. He writes on Substack now, talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is looking at opening an office in Santa Monica, and similarly, they are getting letters and support from the quote unquote local community, but. Do they really need to have it's just a billionaire cash grab? It's a marketing thing. And this is where I feel like the private equity firms, what they're trying to do in buying into this, the NFL franchises have become so valuable that the families that own them are getting worried about that value and looking to hedge some of that and turn some of that value into cash, which is why they're inviting the hedge funds in so they can turn some of their investment that is worth billions of dollars into actual cash that they can use either to operate or to buy elsewhere. I think that that's part of it, because the Cowboys are now worth, I think, somewhere close to $10 billion. Remember when Jerry Jones bought the franchise, I think he paid like $100 million or $200 million. So
that's a lot of money.
The kind of return, I mean, it's silly, but those families also do want to, while they want to hold their controlling interest, they also want to pull some cash out of that. And I thought that Sam had mentioned that in his piece, but I did want to make mention that these franchises have, the reason why they're inviting private equity also is because private equity has stakes in stadiums. They have stakes in entertainment companies. They have stakes in media companies. And now watch the cross-branding promotion between the companies that the private equity owns, all right, and these sports franchises that they're now getting involved with. It's designed so that they can now cross-promote their brands to a mass audience of sports fans.
Exactly. Precisely.
A lot going on here.
Too much going on. And folks, listen, I wish, I truly do wish that things would get better, but knowing how private equity likes to play around in our system, nothing will fundamentally change, unfortunately. And I'm so sorry about that. So, lot of fun. Who's ready for football? Anybody? No?